Welcome back to Praying the Psalms in a World on Fire. I am your host, Tom First. Today, we begin Psalm 3, and with it, something changes. Up until now, the Psalter has felt confident and orderly. Psalm 1 is about wisdom, the blessed life that delights in Torah. Then Psalm 2 declares God's kingship over all the raging nations. But suddenly, in Psalm 3, the bottom falls out, and we enter lament. It'd probably be helpful at this time to read Psalm 3, so that's what I'm going to do for us. Psalm 3, Trust in God under adversity. Psalm of David when he fled from his son Absalom. Verse 1. O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying to me, there is no help for you in God. Selah. But you, O Lord, are a shield around me, my glory and the one who lifts up my head. I cry aloud to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy hill. Selah. I lie down and sleep. I wake again, for the Lord sustains me. I am not afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. Rise up, O Lord. Deliver me, O my God, for you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Deliverance belongs to the Lord. May your blessing be upon your people. Selah. Psalm 3 is the first lament in the Psalter, and it launches, in fact, a whole cluster of laments. Psalm 3 through 7 are all classified as lament. That in itself is astonishing. The editors of the Psalms didn't tuck grief away in the back like an awkward secret. They put grief front and center. They almost let it be the part of the thesis of the book of Psalms. They wanted to make sure that Israel's prayer book started out not only with wisdom and kingship, but also with anguish and protest and loss. And that teaches us a ton about authentic faith in a world on fire. Being faithful doesn't shield us from the fire. It doesn't protect us from suffering. Life isn't going to be perfect because we have faith. Being God's people doesn't mean we skip lament, but that we turn to it. The Psalms insist on telling the truth, the full truth of human existence. Now, you may have noticed that when I was reading the psalm, that Psalm 3 comes with what is called a superscription, a sort of title of sorts to tell you what it's about. It calls itself a Psalm of David when he fled from his son Absalom. Now, we should be clear that these superscriptions were not part of the original prayers. They were added by later editors trying to provide some kind of context. They were added by later people who wanted to connect individual psalms to individual stories in Israel's history. So they don't give us hard historical facts, but they do kind of give us interpretive lenses. Here, the interpretive lens of Psalm 3 is set in one of the darkest episodes in David's life, Absalom's rebellion. King David reduced to a fugitive. The father betrayed by his son, shame layered upon fear. Why tie this psalm to that story? Well, yes, because it keeps the memory alive and it makes it liturgically interesting when you go to worship and the psalm can be read alongside that story in David's life. But more than that, what this does is it democratizes suffering. The psalm is no longer just the king's cry. It's the cry of everyone who has ever felt betrayed, outnumbered, humiliated, and on the run in a world on fire. This, I think, is an important element of resistance. The superscriptions aren't history, they're not historical facts, but they are the ancient community's call to preserve certain memories against erasure. They remind us that lament belongs not only to the weak, the poor, and the vulnerable, but even kings lament. No one is above the need to cry out to God. Now, I have said a couple of times that Psalm 3 is a psalm of lament, so it would be helpful at this time to sort of unpack a little bit about what that means. Psalm 3 follows the classic structure or order of events required of a psalm. It's pretty indicative of the genre. Now, I've noted a couple times that Psalm 3 is a psalm of lament, and Psalms of lament actually follow a pretty predictable pattern. There's a fourfold pattern that Psalms of lament follow. First, there is an expression of lament. Then there is an expression of confidence in God in the midst of the lament. Then there is a discussion of the implications of that confidence. And then there is a petition, that is, calling on God to act. And Psalm 3, in fact, ends with a benediction of sorts. So in lament, the first part, what happens is the psalmist names their crisis explicitly. A lot of people assume, particularly in a world on fire, a lot of people assume that like God already knows. So why do I need to say what I'm grieving about, or say what I'm angry about, or say what I've lost? Why do I need to do that? And the psalmist is saying, no, naming grief, even if God already knows it, naming our grief is an important element of prayer. God wants to hear us talk about what we feel. Then there is confidence. The psalmist is saying, look, God, you haven't protected me yet. I'm on the run. I'm lonely. I've experienced a lot of loss, but I do believe in you. There's a part of me that still believes that you're good even in the midst of my suffering, that you are going to show up. Then the psalmist discusses the implications of that confidence, and then the psalmist petitions God. Says, okay, I've named my grief. Now I'm going to ask you, God, to respond specifically to my grief. This is the structure of the general Psalms of Lament, and it's exactly what you see in Psalm 3. Psalm 3 ends with a benediction. It repeats the key phrasing from earlier, rise up, deliverance, or even the name of God, Yahweh. To drive home the intensity, the psalmist uses repetition. God, I am not going to let this go. God, my mind keeps circling around this over and over and over. I can't sleep at night because my mind keeps going over these words. I need you to rise up. I need you to deliver me, God. My enemies are coming at me. And so structurally, what it does is it helps the reader feel like they are in the midst of the situation, that they too have a mind that won't settle down and keep circling over the same things over and over. But the psalmist is placing those words at the end in a blessing, saying, God, I'm giving these to you, and I'm going to trust that you're going to do something about it. So right away, Psalm 3 interrupts the triumph of Psalm 1 and 2 with the messiness of real life grief. And it reminds us that lament, naming what we feel, naming depression and sadness, naming feeling overwhelmed, that these are not the opposite of faith. Lament is faith that refuses to be a silent conversation partner. It says to God, my voice deserves to be heard, and you have invited me to raise it. My friends, next time we are going to move further into the psalm itself. We're going to listen to its cries. We're going to listen to its voicing of trust. We're going to listen to its petitions, and we'll even revisit its blessing to see how they form a pattern of resistance. Because the Psalms teach us, pray in a world on fire.